A few weeks ago, the Supreme Court dealt a massive blow to Donald Trump's trade war. In a decision that rocked Washington on February 20th, the justices ruled that Trump's use of a 1977 emergency powers law to impose huge tariffs was illegal. But the real story is the chaos it's unleashed. The ruling opens the door for American companies to sue for billions of dollars in refunds, a possibility that has sent the former president scrambling for a new plan. Here's what you need to know. It all started with a law most people have never heard of, the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEPA. Since early 2025, President Trump had used IEPA as the legal justification for a series of sweeping new tariffs, including a baseline 10% duty on goods from nearly every country on Earth. He argued he needed the power to combat everything from trade deficits to fentanyl trafficking. But in a 6-3 decision, the Supreme Court said, "Not so fast." The court declared that IEPA simply does not grant the president the power to unilaterally impose tariffs. The majority opinion, written by Chief Justice John Roberts, was a powerful defense of congressional authority. He argued that the power to tax, and let's be clear, tariffs are a tax, is the birthright power of Congress. For the president to use a power like that, Congress has to be crystal clear in delegating it. Roberts pointed out that Trump was claiming the massive power to tax the entire globe based on just two words in the old statute: regulate and importation. Those words, Roberts wrote, cannot bear such weight. He explained that the U.S. legal code is filled with laws giving the executive branch the power to regulate things. But in no other case does that power to regulate suddenly include the power to tax. If Congress had meant to hand over its constitutional power of the purse, it would have said so. In a key part of the opinion, Roberts, joined by Justices Gorsuch and Barrett, brought up a legal idea called the major questions doctrine. This basically says that for issues with huge economic and political significance, like, say, imposing hundreds of billions in taxes, the president can't just find a vague phrase in a 50-year-old law and claim it gives him sweeping new authority. Congress has to speak clearly. And here, the court found, Congress was silent. The decision created a rare coalition. Chief Justice Roberts was joined by Justices Sotomayor, Kagan, and Jackson, along with two of Trump's own appointees, Neil Gorsuch and Amy Coney Barrett. This wasn't just a loss for Trump. It was a loss delivered in part by the very court he worked so hard to shape. The dissent, written by Justice Kavanaugh and joined by Justices Thomas and Alito, saw it differently. Kavanaugh argued that tariffs have historically been a tool to regulate imports, and that precedent supported the president. He also warned that the decision could create immense uncertainty and might require the government to refund billions. It was a stark warning, but one the majority brushed aside, insisting their job was to interpret the law, not make economic policy. Justice Kavanaugh's warning about refunds is now the central issue. The Supreme Court's decision acted like a legal demolition crew, knocking down the very foundation of these tariffs. In doing so, it may have kicked off one of the biggest tax refund battles in American history. Analysts, like those at the Penn-Wharton budget model, project that up to $175 billion, and possibly more, collected under the now illegal tariffs could be at stake in refund claims. This is the economic earthquake we're talking about. This isn't theoretical money, it's cash paid, dollar by American companies. It's a common myth that countries like China pay for tariffs. The reality is, the cost is paid by U.S. importers, everyone from giants like FedEx to small, family-owned businesses. Those companies then have to choose, either eat the cost and watch profits disappear, or pass it on to customers through higher prices. For over a year, they've been doing both. So, what happens now? The Supreme Court didn't order the government to start writing checks. It just said the tariffs were illegal. This gives importers the legal green light to demand their money back, and the fight has now moved to a specialized court, the U.S. Court of International Trade, or CIT. And things are already moving fast. Thousands of companies have filed lawsuits seeking refunds. In a significant development just weeks after the Supreme Court's ruling, a judge at the CIT, Richard Eaton, issued a powerful order in a case brought by Atmos Filtration. He declared that all importers who paid the illegal tariffs were entitled to refunds with interest and directed U.S. Customs to start the process. He also consolidated the cases under his docket, signaling a clear intent to manage this centrally. But this is no simple task. The government has argued the refund process is unprecedented in scale, covering over 70 million import entries. They've pushed back, suggesting the issue could be litigated for years. Judge Eaton seemed unimpressed, telling a court hearing that Customs knows how to issue refunds because they do it every day. Still, the government is expected to appeal his order, which means the legal battle is far from over. For businesses, this is a moment of both opportunity and anxiety. Legal experts are advising companies to immediately figure out how much they paid under the illegal tariffs. But many small business owners are skeptical, worried that the bureaucratic hurdles and legal fees might not be worth it. Despite the cynicism, the legal dominoes are falling. The Court of International Trade has fired the starting gun, and a massive, high-stakes race for billions of dollars is officially underway. While importers were lawyering up, Donald Trump was plotting his response. It was swift, furious, and aimed directly at the institution that had just dismantled his signature policy. Within hours, Trump held a press conference, and the frustration was obvious. He called the ruling deeply disappointing and said he was ashamed of certain members of the court. He praised the three dissenters, Thomas, Alito, and Kavanaugh, for their strength and wisdom and love of our country. This was more than just a legal disagreement. It was a personal attack on the legitimacy of the court. It painted a picture of a president who felt betrayed by a court he expected to be loyal. His fury was rooted in the fact that this ruling gutted the core of his America First agenda. He had long boasted that the tariffs were bringing in hundreds of billions of dollars from other countries, helping to pay down the debt. The Supreme Court ruling exposed that narrative as a fantasy. It clarified that the money wasn't a windfall from other nations. It was a tax on Americans that the court had just declared illegal. His public statements showed a mix of defiance and a desperate attempt to project control. But it doesn't matter because we have very powerful alternatives, he insisted. In a social media post, he claimed that other authorities available to him were even stronger than the tariffs that had just been struck down. This split-screen reaction, lashing out while simultaneously scrambling for a plan B, paints a clear picture of a president in a bind. His most powerful economic weapon was just taken away by a court he helped build, and his entire trade doctrine was now facing an existential threat. The panic wasn't just about policy, it was about the perception of power. The Supreme Court had drawn a line, and Donald Trump was furious to be on the wrong side of it. In the immediate aftermath, Trump's message was clear: this fight is far from over. And he's right. The Supreme Court's decision was a huge blow, but it was also very specific. It didn't outlaw all tariffs. It just said the president couldn't use IEEPA to impose them. Other presidential tariff powers, granted under different laws, were left untouched. And Trump wasted no time. Literally within hours of the decision, the Trump administration announced it was invoking a different, more obscure law, Section 122 of the Trade Act of 1974. This law lets the president impose a temporary import surcharge of up to 15% for 150 days to deal with a balance of payments crisis. Using this authority, Trump immediately slapped a new, flat 10% tariff on goods from all countries, which took effect just 4 days later. The next morning, he announced he intended to raise that to the 15% maximum. It was a stunningly fast pivot, meant to show that he would find other ways to keep his tariff wall standing. But Section 122 has its limits. First, there's that 150-day time limit. Any extension requires an act of Congress. Second, the law was designed for a totally different economic era and has never been used before. Using it for broad protectionist policy is legally aggressive and is already being challenged in court. Beyond the immediate pivot, the administration also signaled its next moves. Trump directed his trade representative to launch new investigations under Section 301 of the Trade Act of 1974, the same tool he used against China in his first term. This all underscores a critical point. The Supreme Court ruling didn't end the trade war, but it definitely changed the rules of the game. The president's ability to impose massive, sweeping tariffs overnight under IEEPA is gone. Now he has to use other laws that come with more hurdles and shorter timelines. The trade war will continue, but it will be fought on different legal terrain, with different weapons, under a new set of constraints. First, the Supreme Court has decisively checked the president's power on trade. By striking down the use of IEEPA for tariffs, the court sent a clear message. The president can't just invent new taxes without explicit permission from Congress. It's a major reaffirmation of the separation of powers. Second, an economic earthquake is just beginning, as a massive legal battle over billions in refunds gets underway. The Court of International Trade has opened the floodgates, but how and when that money, potentially as much as $200 billion, gets returned will be one of the biggest financial stories to watch. And third, Donald Trump's trade war is not over. It has just entered a new, more complicated phase. Despite the legal defeat, the president has already pivoted to other laws to impose new tariffs, guaranteeing that the economic uncertainty will continue for businesses and consumers. This decision is more than just a headline. It's a constitutional stress test, a massive economic event, and a political firestorm all rolled into one. The fallout will affect everything from the price of everyday goods to the balance of power in Washington. We'll be following every step of this story, from the legal fight for billions in refunds to the administration's next moves. To make sure you don't miss any updates on this developing situation, make sure you subscribe to the channel.